Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. I hope you are well. We are wrapping up this week looking at some of the spiritual disciplines of abstinence, the things that we abstain from so that we might grow in godliness and help our heart be formed to be more like Christ. This morning, I want to briefly talk about one that Dallas Willard talks about in his wonderful book, The Spirit of the Disciplines. And he talks about the discipline, he calls it the discipline of secrecy. It's kind of he even says he needs a better name for it. But let me read this for us. This is really, I think, critical, especially in our social media age today. It says, in the discipline of secrecy, and here again, the word is not perfectly suited to our purposes, we abstain from causing our good deeds and qualities to be known. We may even take steps to prevent them from being known if it does not involve deceit. To help us loose or tame the hunger for fame, justification, or just the mere attention of others, we will often need the help of this grace, of this discipline of secrecy. But as we practice this discipline, we learn to love to be unknown and even to accept misunderstanding without the loss of our peace, our joy, and our purpose. In the practice of secrecy, we experience a continuing relationship with God independent of the opinions of others. This is one of the key things that this does, is it helps us have this intimacy with God that is not dependent on the opinions of others. And boy, the opinions of others impacts us more than we would ever realize. And this gets right down to really forming our heart to be in union with Christ. He goes on to say, one of the greatest fallacies of our faith, and actually one of the greatest acts of unbelief, is the thought that our spiritual acts and virtues need to be advertised to be known. Secrecy, rightly practiced, enables us to place our public relations department entirely in the hands of God. Wow, how do we need to pay attention to that, especially in this social media, likes and follows on Facebook and everything else? We need to place our public relations department entirely in the hands of God, who lit our candles so we could be the light of the world, not so we could hide under a bushel. We allow him, God, to decide when our deeds will be known and when our light will be noticed. Secrecy at its best teaches us love and humility before God and before others. And let me just mention a couple passages here. This is in Matthew 6. This is obviously in the Sermon on the Mount. And Jesus says this in verse 3. He says, "But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you." A couple things here. One is he says when you give, not if you give. The expectation of a follower of Christ is to be a giver. And the second thing is we see here the promise of the Father is he wants us to do this in secret between us and him. And then just down to verse 6, it says, "But when you pray, go into your room and shut the door and pray to your Father who's in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you." God wants us to come to him alone and to really nurture this intimate, personal relationship with him that is removed from our relationship with others. That's important, but boy, we need to develop that time alone. And then on to verse 17, "But when you fast," not if you, Jesus says, "but when you fast, anoint your head, wash your face, that your fasting may not be seen by others, but by your Father who is in secret. And your Father who sees in secret, he will reward you." The final thing here is just the promise that Jesus tells us that our Father will reward us. Those who pursue and seek after the Father, he promises reward. He promises, all right, to come to us and to honor those efforts that we put forth, right, to be like him and to seek him. So I hope this encourages you with this spiritual discipline. Next week, we'll get into the ones of encouragement and look more deeply at these things. Have an awesome weekend.